the PlayStation is quite a weird place for good 3D platformers. I already mentioned Pandemonium, a good game, but not a 3D platformer, that's for sure. Crash Bandicoot, again not really a 3D platformer per se, closer, sure, great game, sure, but not a fully fledged 3D world. You've got maybe, I don't know, Jumping Flash, again another great game, but this time it's all in first person mode. Nope, I wanted a proper 3D platformer. You know, something to go up against that March 1997 release of Mario 64. And before you say Spyro the Dragon, well, you got well over 2 years to wait before that's released. Looking back, I suppose the PS1 really only had Crash Bandicoot as its saviour in the platformer arena. And even though it came out 4 months before Mario 64, in my personal opinion, back then the Crash Bandicoot series didn't really grab me until the second or third game. And by that point, I would actually argue it's one of the PlayStation's, heck, possibly even the whole of the 5th generation's best platformers, period. It's not all bad though. At the time I was having great fun with games like Destruction Derby 2, Wipeout 2097, Twisted Metal and Crazy Yvonne. Even though I would never admit it, at the time, a game like Mario 64 was seriously the envy of anybody that chose a PlayStation over the N64. However, 7 months later, on October 1997, the PlayStation got its rival. Haha, stop that angry rant comment. Before we get into the meat of this episode, I'll tell you now, Croc is not better than Mario 64. But damn it, it's a bloody good attempt and its backstory has more in common with the legendary platformer than you may think. So let's get into it and delve deep into the origins and look at all 7 games, yes 7 games, as we run, swim, climb and jelly jump into the complete history of Croc. Welcome to Slope's Game Room. So here it is, Mario 64. Just like the Mario games before it, you could argue that it helped make platforming the massive craze that it once was. Not just with the 2D older games, but now with this, 3D platformers too. Ah yes, 3D platformers came out left, right and centre, partly due to everyone losing their mind with this game. Well, you would actually be mistaken in thinking that Croc was just another one of those games trying to jump onto the mascot bandwagon. In fact, Croc almost replaced Mario 64, and dare I say it, it influenced it too. But, haha, let's hold up a second. We're in fact getting a little ahead of ourselves. So, let's go back to the beginning. Argonaut Games, a PlayStation game developer house that have been making games dating all the way back to 1984's Skyline Attack on the Commodore 64. However, my personal first experience was Ren and Stimpy Fire Dogs, and of course, the oh so amazing 3D Movie Maker for the PC. Who knew this would have been what I actually end up doing with my free time? Anyway, to most people watching this, the first time you would have all known about this company was with this. Star Fox for the SNES. Argonaut actually helped with the programming of that game and eventually made Star Fox 2, which as you no doubt know was fully made but cancelled before its release. However, this relationship with Nintendo grew and grew due to the two working together so closely. Nintendo learned how to make 3D software and Argonaut discovered how to make great characters. Well, you don't get it right all the time. Anyway, Nintendo had just made the game Yoshi's Island with an outside company, HAL Laboratory, something the company didn't normally do. So the guys at Argonaut, with their close relationship to Nintendo, decided to try and make the first ever 3D platformer, using a classic Nintendo franchise in the hope that Nintendo would let them create it. Move over, Miyamoto. It was actually the mysterious Marcus Morgan that put together the original idea of a 3D Mario game. However, the prototype actually wasn't the Mario 64 that you know it, but instead it blended together Mario Kart with Super Mario World, resulting in Yoshi Racing. The game, according to the Argonaut founder Jez San, looked a lot like Mario 64, albeit with Yoshi, but 2 years prior. The company obviously gave first dibs to Nintendo to let them make a 3D game, and Miyamoto was incredibly enthusiastic. It was clear the guys at Argonaut had struck gold, and it was at this point when Nintendo backed away and said they wasn't interested, closing the door on what would have possibly been the first ever 3D Mario related platformer. Sorry Yoshi, Mario wins again. So what the hell happened between Argonaut and Nintendo? It seemed like the duo was onto a winning streak, which could have even rivaled Nintendo's relationship with Rare. Well, we'll get to that soon enough. Either way, Nintendo said no and let them take the tech demo elsewhere. Now obviously the team couldn't take a 3D Yoshi game to another company, so they had no choice but to change it. Introducing Simon Keating. The only real direction was that the character had to look like Yoshi. Simon came up with loads of different designs, but ultimately ended up with the character that we all know and love. Oh, and by the way, fun fact, the reason Croc only has one tooth is due to Simon's cat only having one tooth too. Now obviously having Croc, going to save the princess, it seemed a bit stupid. But he did need a mission, and that's when the Gobos came in. Little balls of fluff that in pre-production stage were actually pink before turning brown. The story itself, well, is a bit obvious. Evil bad guy shows up, kidnaps loads of those Gobo things, and you go and save them. It is believed that Fox Interactive, the publishers of the game, actually paid an unknown Simpsons writer to write the story, which can be found in the manual. Feel free to pause the screen right now to read it. Okay, moving on. Now you guys no doubt like me remember Croc on the PlayStation 1. In fact, it's one of my fondest memories for the system. Well, this game actually started being worked on for the Sega Saturn originally, and involved, and I quote, a chubby crocodile running down what were effectively tubular pipes in the snow, which made no sense whatsoever. It's crazy to think back now at a 3D platformer that is essentially as simple as Croc, and realise that it was actually the result of a hell of a lot of trial and error before getting it right. But right, they got it, and on September 29th, 1997 in North America, and a month later for us Brits, Croc, Legend of the Gobos was released. This game, like I said, holds a lot of nostalgia for me, but for the purpose of this review, I'm going to try my very best to be as non-nostalgic as possible. Even if he is possibly the most cutest thing ever, which you absolutely lose yourself to in the first minute of the game, and the intro where you see King Rufus and the rest of the Gobos raise Croc to become the hero that the town needs, even getting to see the gorgeous little reptile take his first steps before seeing his guardians kidnapped. You can't deny it, that intro really sets up the game quite nicely. But let's actually look at the gameplay. So, playing back the game nowadays, sadly isn't actually as good as I remember it. It is still good, sure, but a bit average compared to what is actually available to you retro collectors nowadays. And even though I would class myself as quite a big fan of that original Croc game, I can now see why I never completed it. It's so goddamn repetitive. Sure, the first level looks great, gets you to grips with Croc's moves, and even gives you the options of hidden areas. But that's really it. Yeah, things move about the next time you enter the same looking world, but in all honesty, you're going to really feel like you've played the same level over and over again. Plus on top of all that, the controls, they're sort of weird. For everything it gets right, like the instant 180-degree turn, it gets something wrong. Like the typical awkward camera angles and the slippery as hell running animations. I mean seriously, it actually feels more like you're driving a car rather than a platformer by today's standards, but considering all the way back when it was essentially Yoshi driving, maybe those mechanics pushed their way to this game too. But then again, with all of its revisions since then, maybe not. But now, with all that bad stuff out the way, Croc actually did exactly what it was supposed to do. It was yet again another attempt at a mascot for the PlayStation era, but this time it really did succeed, becoming the #1 seller on both PlayStation 1 and Saturn consoles upon release. And for its time, it's really not that bad of a game. Again, not groundbreaking, but far from bad. The PlayStation 1 is the best version to play, the Saturn version is a little bit more glitchy and a little bit more zoomed in, and the PC version, well, that one probably looks the best. If 3D platforming collectathon are your bag, well, then this game will be right up your street. In each level you need to find 5 coloured gems before you can open up a special door which will hopefully get you to find another missing Gobo, which will eventually unlock hidden stages and even unlock a final ending to the game past what you already thought was the ending of the game. And hey, if it worked for games like Banjo-Kazooie, then it's obviously going to work here too, right? Well, sort of. You see, the problem with Croc is you don't really feel like you're rewarded for collecting, other than unlocking a new area, which, yet again, looks exactly like the same area you've just played. Look, I'm not trying to give Croc a hard time, because there is genuine fun to have here with this game. But honestly, after playing it for the first time in well over a decade, the flaws really do stand out. And although the crocodile with all the moves to rival Mario did in fact make a pretty decent impact during its release, it's obvious to see why the game hasn't exactly made the biggest impact on gaming as a whole. And well, it's just not as good as I remember it. I really do wish Nintendo kept this and gave it the loving care and attention that they always do with their first party studios. Perhaps then we would have had something that was truly extra special. However, with all that said, what is just as good as I remember it is the music. Put together by already well-established soundtrack creator Justin Scarvona, who outside of his video game soundtrack creations worked with Jason Nevins of all people on many of his remixes. The soundtrack was also worked on by Steve Levine, the guy who produced and recorded both The Clash's self-titled album and Culture Club's Colours by Numbers album. It's a catchy as hell soundtrack that not only fits the cutesy, brightly coloured game, but also, in my opinion, stands to rival even the most memorable 3D platformer soundtracks of all time. I don't think you should give up on Croc. If you ever see it for sale, go and pick it up. Are you ever going to complete a game like this? Probably not, it's way too repetitive for that. But everything up to the point when you put your controller down is actually quite a lot of old school linear 3D platforming fun. On a scale of 1 to 10, it's probably a 7. A strong 7. That really is quite the important game, all things considered. And as you would expect, it was important enough and appealing enough for kids like me to buy, which obviously resulted in Croc 2 released 2 years later. This time only for the PlayStation. This game probably looks to you guys just like the first game, and really, it sort of is. It's a bit better on the control side of things, the graphics seem to be a tad better too, and Croc even has a few more moves. But sadly, with all of these positives, you get one horrific camera angle, which somehow seems worse than before. In my opinion, it actually almost completely destroys the game, and that's a shame. Even the game developers much preferred this game over the original, due to ironing out a few of its problems. But they also admit that that camera angle is not good. And like I said, that's a shame, because I honestly believe there's a pretty damn special game hidden underneath all this. You have an in-game shop that you can go to, which lets you buy more health and whatnot, and the levels themselves are actually more open in this game, feeling far less linear than before, giving you the option to actually go off and explore. Something that is truly welcomed in a 3D platformer game, with a heavy emphasis on collecting. All in all, the game is a decent jump forward, minus those camera angles. And although a third game and final installment was sort of planned for the PlayStation 1, 2, GameCube and original Xbox called Croc 3 Stone of the Gobos, or Croc 3 Baron's Revenge, or even Croc 3 Croc Returns ! It was sadly never made. But 1 year later, we did actually get another Croc game, simply titled Croc for the Game Boy Color. Oh yes, if you know me, even though I like my 3D platformers, 2D platformers is where it's at. And this one is as bloody forgettable as they come. The music's nice, but as you can see, it plays terribly. Plus on top of all this, the level layouts range from simple and boring to just downright awful, but somehow even this game got a sequel with Croc 2 1 year later, again for the Game Boy Color. This game is better than the original, but still pretty damn bad. It's actually different this time, going for a, dare I say it, Zelda style game. I mean, what were they thinking? They made a game that feels, to be fair, absolutely huge for a Game Boy Color cart. But everything looks the same, and get this, you got no map. The game is boring as hell. You will be spending hours upon hours trying to work out where you are, which will result in you quitting the game as soon as possible. The funny thing is, speedrunners that obviously run out of things to speedrun can beat this game in just under 18 minutes. This just shows you how empty and barren the world of Croc 2 is. I suppose there's a few sort of okay puzzle areas to be found here, but honestly, other than those that want to collect all of the Croc games, there is absolutely no reason to go and try this one out, which is probably why it was actually the last game in the series for home consoles, leaving only the remaining 3 Croc games to be Croc mobile games, released in 2005. Jungle Rumble and Volcanic Panic are very obvious Java-based isometric games. They're okay, I suppose. To be fair, they are some of the better Java games I've actually played, but obviously again, really not worth going out of your way to play. Which leaves me with the final game in the series, Croc Mobile Pinball. It's a pinball game. A pinball game with one table, fairly rubbish physics, and nothing else going for it. And sadly guys, that is it. Croc is quite a fondly looked back on series, and in my opinion, that first game as well as some of the second game are really the gems of the whole franchise. It's all downhill from there. However, unlike the majority of forgotten mascots of the 5th generation, Croc is one that is slightly more fondly remembered, and actually has one of the most interesting backstories of them all. Developed by the team that made one of the SNES's most groundbreaking games before unknowingly influencing probably the most fondly remembered 3D platformer of all time. I'll leave you with this final quote, as told by Argonaut founder Jez San. Stick your teeth into this and voice your opinions in the comments section below. Miyamoto came up to me at a show afterwards and apologised for not doing the Yoshi game with us, and thanked us for the idea to do a 3D platform game. He also said that we would make enough royalties from our existing deal to make up for it. That felt hollow to me, as I'm of the opinion that Nintendo ended our agreement without fully realising it. They canned Star Fox 2 even though it was finished, and used much of our code in Star Fox 64 without paying us a penny. Hey guys, thanks for checking out my video. If you want to check out some more of my videos, click the links that you see at the top of the screen. If you haven't already, please rate, favourite, comment and subscribe. And if you want to support the show that little bit extra, come and check me out over on Patreon. This is DJ Slope signing out, and hopefully I'll see you all next time.